Welcome to an Indie Film Podcast film review. I'm Victoria.
And I am Chuck. Today we're reviewing the film The Lonely Crowd, which is produced by Jim St. Clair, as well as co-produced, written, and directed by David St. Clair.
In a unique blending of the genres and a battle of the sexes, The Lonely Crowd is a romantic thriller that started with one fateful digital blind date.
Victoria, how would you rate The Lonely Crowd? Would you buy it, rent it, or just wait until it's free?
I would give The Lonely Crowd a solid rent it rating.
I'm going to agree with you. I would also rent The Lonely Crowd. And what is The Lonely Crowd about? Can you give us a little bit more of a deeper synopsis?
Absolutely. Peter and Ashley, both jaded by online dating, agree to one final in-person try. Their dinner starts well, but soon devolves into a tense battle of the sexes. Ashley abruptly leaves, and Peter finds her outside being accosted by another man. Peter steps in to help, unknowingly entering the dangerous world of Ashley's murderous ex-boyfriend, corrupt cops, and stolen drug money. Can they trust each other long enough to survive, or will their differences cost them everything?
We're not going to spoil it for you because we think that you should rent this film. But should we talk about what we thought the highlights of this movie were?
I'm going to start with probably the best logline-ish review that I possibly can of this film, and that's that as a woman who is trepidatious about online dating because of fears of murder and kidnapping and all sorts of bad things, it was really refreshing to see that happen to a man for once.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
So I'm just going to throw that out there. David St. Clair, tops.
Dudes,
Thank you.
Be careful.
Yeah.
Online dating, you might get kidnapped.
Everyone should be afraid. Okay, anyway, that's my little soapbox moment. Okay, yes, let's chat highlights and lowlights.
Yes, I have some highlights for this film as well. The one that stood out to me most, though, was the acting, because I felt like the acting was very strong. The main characters carried it, and I want to give a special shout out to Andrew Mena, who played this character named Charlie.
The motel attendant,
and he knocked it out of the park.
That was so wonderful. He was such a character, and character actors are kind of hard to find. And as such just a smaller side role, who obviously had some history with one of the main characters.
Yeah.
It was so great to see him. He was absolutely phenomenal. I included that as one of my highlights too, but also I included Robert Pastrozny, who played the server, who has this just scathing, dry wit and humor for some of the lines that are delivered. And So, yes, leads, main characters, solid, dramatic, biting, heavy. But man, some of those side characters were really good too.
Oh, I dug them for sure.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things as a filmmaker, myself, we're both filmmakers. It was refreshing to be reminded that the acting and the characters can steal the scene, because a lot of times we get caught up in the technical execution of things, which I do want to point out for this film. Technically, it was solid.
Yeah.
St. Clair did a great job of bringing on an incredible crew of people, I imagine. Like the audio and the video was great. Indie films, they can be distracting sometimes, unfortunately.
Can be. And this one ran the entire spectrum of this, charmingly small hometown America kind of feel, but then also bustling city, very urban apartments, and everything in between. They did a really good job. Even a junkyard, auto shop was in there too. Art department.
Yes.
Art department did their jobs well.
Yeah, they were all over the place.
They were.
And I did like the junkyard scene.
Yeah, the junkyard stuff was good.
That was very cool. Very well done. And do you have any other highlights that you'd like to add? Because I have one more, but it kind of bleeds into one of my critiques of the film.
My other highlight is that logic kind of left the building in some moments.
So we got the same highlight / low light. This is a mid light.
It's you need mid-ground though. That's what adds diversity to any good picture.
Good point. Good point.
You need that. But there were some moments where you really needed to suspend belief.
Yes,
there's the right way to phrase this.
It felt very fantasy and fictionalized.
Yes.
And it wasn't because of the setting. There weren't any fairies and there were no monsters.
No.
It wasn't a horror film, but sometimes you're seeing what's going on and it made you laugh. It made me laugh because I was like, I don't think that's a realistic ending of this scenario.
No, I think being handcuffed to a headrest
in a car
was maybe not great, especially if you're boasting about having a paper clip and thinking you can use that to escape when you can just pop the headrest out.
Yeah, headrests just pop out of cars.
So I don't know if that, but also then that kind of added a little bit of comedy to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I felt like, okay, so this is a rom-com and an action thriller and kind of a drug crime ring situation. So it's just a lot of genres. And I wasn't mad about it. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed it.
It was packed in there. And actually, I'm going to say that's one of my critiques of the film. I thought there was way too much going on in the movie. But at the same time, some of those scenes that really stuck out to me did make me laugh.
Yeah.
Like there was a scene where somebody got a door dinger. And how would you resolve a door dinger in a parking lot?
Usually you trade insurance information.
Or you could just murder. Murder is another option.
Murder is another option.
And I thought that was great. It was a lot of fun.
But it felt so true to the character. I was like, yeah, I logically believe that would be the next logical step for this gentleman. Absolutely. How else is he going to resolve this guy? Couldn't bribe him, so now he's going to kill him. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of a spoiler alert on that scene, but it's not a main character.
Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. You still want to watch it. It's worth the watch. Don't worry. You should still watch it.
So I do want to...
That's not the only little twist, too. This film does have a couple of twists in it that I genuinely enjoyed.
It's a roller coaster.
There we go. It's a roller coaster of emotion.
So I do want to say that the writing and story, like I said, I felt like it was packed. There was a lot going on, and for an indie film, I feel like it's better to go deep than it is to go wide.
Yeah.
For example, why did Peter need to be a former baseball player? So the main character was a former baseball player. I mean, I guess it kind of came up at the end, but not really in a satisfying way.
I'm a baseball fan, so I'm not mad at it, but they did bring it up a lot
marketing.
in the film.
Good point for the marketing. I didn't think about that. So, and then do you really need more than one MacGuffin in a film?
How many things are you chasing?
Yeah. And then, hostage situation. When do you take a hostage versus just murder? If you are a character that has a history of murder, why are you taking some people hostage? Like, it didn't make sense to me.
Sometimes the logic just left the building a little bit.
Yeah.
And as long as you're willing to look past that, then it was flawless.
Okay. Yeah. Well, did you have anything that you wanted to criticize?
I did.
What do you got?
So, first and foremost, I did really like the story and the concept. I thought that was interesting and fun, and most importantly, I thought it was different. Mm-hmm. I thought it was different to take a thriller and a romance and mash them up together. I liked that. But I did have an issue with some of the tropes in the more romance.
Oh, I bet I know which one you're about to mention. Go ahead.
First of all, like leaning into the idea that this woman is, but I'm different and I'm special and I'm unique. And I'm kind of over that. I've seen that a lot. Even her screen name is like not your typical dame or something like that, which I'm like, okay, that's a lot. But then also, I don't think a woman being trapped in any type of abusive relationship is just down to daddy issues. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. So when you write it off as just your daddy issues, and then you have the lead female character validate that is right, I just felt a little shallow.
Maybe a little bit.
I did not like that.
I think maybe run some of those ideas past a close female friend of yours.
Yes.
My biggest... I do agree with that point there. My biggest issue with the film overall was the pacing.
Yeah.
I felt like the editing room could have chopped some gaps there. There were big holds between lines, and I would have liked to seen some variety in the pacing in the dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was waiting around a lot of the time for the actor to say the next line, and you don't have to cut to the next actor to have them say the next line.
You can have their line happen.
Just get it in there.
Yeah.
Move the thing along.
Yeah, I will say the edit, it was a shaggy edit. And the worst part is I don't feel like that did a lot of favors for the actors and their performances.
Yeah, for sure. But they still did a great job in spite of the editing being a little long. A little sluggish, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, so Chuck, who's this movie made for?
This movie, I think, the movie Lonely Crowd, is made for dialogue-loving single men with rescue fantasies. That's who I would recommend. Check this out.
Perfect. I'm going to say that this movie is for couples and roommates who absolutely cannot agree on a genre of films, but do know that they want to be entertained.
There we go. I dig it. And if you want to see this movie, we'll have a link in the description.
We will.
And you can click on it, and we recommend that you rent it.
We
It's
recommend
available
checking it out.
to rent. So if you like this, and if you'd like to submit your film to be reviewed, go to indiefilmpodcast.com/submit, and subscribe for more reviews, as well as to see us chat indie filmmaking on a week-by-week basis. Is that all we got?
I think that's everything.
Shall we succinctly say farewell?
I think so.
Bye.
Bye.